Hey guys, welcome back to the Gameweek 5 deadline stream. A lot of interesting news today. Finally, a little bit of movement, I would say, around FPL with James sidelined for the game. It seems like it's actually for illness as opposed to injury, so we'll be seeing him miss Game Week 5, but potentially arrive back at the weekend for Game Week 6. And as a James owner myself, I am planning to start James, but in reality, that's probably just going to be Andreas coming into the team. And the bench isn't very deep, but I'm not expecting any of these players to miss out. In terms of rotation risk, we obviously have Holland, but I think he's coming off the bench no matter what. I have stuck my captaincy on him anyways, because I do expect him to start, maybe get around 60 minutes at the very minimum. And hopefully, by the time he gets subbed off, when City are winning something like 3-0 or 4-0, that Holland would be the one who's contributed the absolute most by then. James does seem to be 100% out. There's a lot of in the know sources from Chelsea that are suggesting he has been suffering from an illness and that it's a precautionary move specifically. Hey Adam, how are you doing? Hey Harold, nice to see you. But yeah, Dan, I think that's the move. So I do think some of the suggested moves that I would suggest is if you don't have Triple City to move into someone like Ruben Diaz this week or John Stones. Walker is also another option, but I do think he's probably actually close to rotation more so than Diaz and Stones. And Diaz and Stones seem to be locked in, even though Manuel Kanji does seem to be closing in on City, just because Ake, for me, is going to be a doubt for this fixture. And Sergio Gomez could, in fact, start, which could maybe see Walker sit on the bench, sorry, and that's why I don't like Walker so much as far as Stones and Diaz and how they compare. When we're talking about other options, I guess you could also make a lateral move towards Cucurella. I know some people are interested in going for Dunk. I already have him in my team, so I didn't really see another point of making that move. Ultimately, yes, it's probably going to seem like I'm going to play a 3-5-2 on paper this week with Andreas coming in, and the mirror matchup is going to be Andreas versus Dunk. But I just didn't really like the transfer, and I just prefer James if he's able to play at West Ham. That's my main logic. And holding two free transfers, I think, is quite essential, given the amount of rotation that we might see with some of these teams, especially as they head towards European fixtures. So I just prefer, I guess, the security of two free transfers on Game Week 6 more than anything. Looking at the chat, Gunners go. How are you doing? Reece James out. Yeah, it seems like Reece James is out. He starts my team, but I'm not expecting him to play. David asks, yep, hope you're doing well. Dunk 4.6 or Estupinian 4.5. I would go for Estupinian. I went for Dunk last week because I didn't really know whether Estupinian would immediately get starts, and frankly, he has. I think he played 78 minutes last week, and he looked quite good. Is actually around 0.6 expected assists so far, so far so good with him, and I can see Trossard continuing to play outside of the left wing back position. He's moved higher up into the field, and I do think the team actually has space for Estupinian to actually consistently start. But if you wanted to be, I would say, a safer manager, slightly more risk averse, then you would probably just go for Dunk as a transfer if you could afford it. Webster is another move that you might want to consider just because he's 4.5, and if you want to save that 0.1 in the bank and you're not a big fan of maybe gambling on the upside of Estupinian, then maybe you could go for Webster as well. Hyper, thank you very much. Henry, nice to see you around as well. Leo Cheng, how are you doing? Any news on Zinchenko? There weren't any updates, I think. The only update we really got for Arsenal today was that El Neni has actually suffered quite a significant injury. I do think there's a at least 50% chance that Zinchenko starts the game. So if I was a Zinchenko owner, I would probably actually start him for FPL this week, and I really wouldn't think about a transfer away from him. Is there anyone thinking about transfers for Reece James outside of the kind of bog standard Brighton, City, and even Chelsea players? Is anyone looking at Perisic? I just feel like without the Spurs team use and because Perisic has played 2 games in a row and started, I just can't really see why I would make that transfer. It just feels like I'm gambling with a Perisic 1 pointer when I could just get James, who's probably going to be nailed to start versus West Ham sooner rather than later. Also, just as an aside, if you guys would like the video, that'd be really appreciated. Hey Z, nice to see you around. Hope you're doing well. You've been a little bit inactive on Discord, but obviously feel free to always chime in. I know you're quite busy. Gordon Chow, how are you doing, Lamar Cup? Gordon Chow is obviously a real life friend of mine. Not very well in the Lamar Cup, if we have to be honest. I'm actually third place. Effectively, well, third out of fourth, really, because Jason Wong's not a real player. So, yeah. Felipe, thank you so much for the donation. You went Mount to Bernardo for vibes. There's a couple of players that I know who've actually also gone into Bernardo this week. I do think this is the best Gundogan week on paper because we have him rested, but Bernardo seems like he could be set for another season where he's doing extremely well when it comes down to FPL. And what I like about Bernardo so far is because his expected goal involvements with the small sample size that we have this season so far has actually increased on paper compared to the previous year. So that's a huge plus for Bernardo owners. And I can understand moving into someone like Bernardo because he's at such an accessible price range and does give you the upside of potentially upgrading another midfielder or even a forward in the future. I really think, for example, someone like Solanke from Bournemouth is going to be a transfer to think about. As far as Anka, thank you so much. Thank you for the DM response. It is crazy. Is it crazy to sell James if it allows me to keep Cancelo / Salah, Haaland, Kane? If I keep Jesus, I can't. That's right, you're on a wild card, Anka. So I think you absolutely actually should sell James. It would be quite interesting to go Cucurella if you could. That would keep you still within reach of the Chelsea defense. And I think he's probably the Chelsea defender with the second most amount of upside. He's still underpriced, arguably, because he was priced as a Brighton asset at the start of the game. So if Cucurella is someone you could fit into your team whilst also retaining that threemium, I'd be quite interested to see how you do consistently going forwards with Salah, Haaland, Kane. That would be quite fun. I think Emerson Royale is a very underrated pick. Look, frankly, he's actually started 3 games in a row now, or even 4, arguably. And what I would have to say is Emerson just doesn't pass the eye test for me as a player. I think the fact that he starts and the fact that because he actually still gets involved in many attacking positions and actually does find himself within the final third of the field does suggest he's a good pick, but I can't really back him as an asset. I just feel like Doherty was someone who, at his best last season before he was injured, was a lot better than Emerson. And I think it's very clear that Conte doesn't really hate Emerson that much. Ultimately, though, he is well priced, and if you want to go for that kind of punt and you do back the Spurs defense, then I can't really hate the pick. I think it's better, for example, than Dyer and even Romero, who are similarly priced at 5.0. Who's my captain? It's actually going to be Haaland this week, so let's have a look at that. Just keep it on for there for now. Salah or Haaland captaincy. I mean, it's really a 50-50 decision, right? I personally think Haaland's going to start, and I'm going to captain Haaland. You meant Jesus, not James. Sorry about that. I think you do want to keep Jesus for now. I still think the next few weeks for Arsenal are just very good. When we look at these fixtures together, I'd say might be interesting to keep Jesus until game week 9 at the very least. Because with exception to the United fixture where I still think Arsenal can score, these 3 games out of these next 4 are just way too good to pass up Jesus, in my opinion. And if I had to choose, let's say, between, if you wanted to keep the threemium, I'd probably actually downgrade Cancelo first before I downgraded Jesus. And that's my general thoughts on Cancelo so far. Is Trippier worth holding on? Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no reason to not hold Trippier. If you're someone who is in the situation where maybe you have a slot in your team available for someone like Trippier or Perisic, I'd much rather actually have Trippier. He's cheaper. He has great fixtures after Liverpool. And simply put, especially with the West Ham fixture being in Game Week 7, West Ham being so poor, I think Trippier becomes one of the best fullbacks in the game and is arguably underpriced. Bailey to Bernardo. I don't think there's much of a risk in that transfer. I think that's a huge upgrade in isolation. Are you captaining Bernardo, Samarth? Is Son to Sterling worth a hit? Probably not worth a hit, my friend. I'd still probably stick with Son and maybe transfer him out next week if he continues to blank. Saliba or Gabriel? I'm someone who's going to back Saliba just because he's cheaper. And I'm hoping you could actually save the funds and to do some more interesting moves. Kane captaincy? I probably wouldn't stick the captaincy on Kane. If I had one of Haaland or Salah, I'd definitely stick it over Kane this week. Hey Mooks, how are you doing? I wanted to know, is Jesus a good captaincy? I don't really like Jesus as a captaincy because we've heard some pretty significant Arsenal injury news to the midfield. So Partey being out is rather significant. Zinchenko potentially not being fit is another, I guess, spanner in the works. And then you also have potentially, actually El Neni simply does have an injury as well, and he's confirmed to be out. So those 2 things will impact the Arsenal midfield. It's definitely going to be much less defensively resolute. And even on the ball, I think when we're talking about ball retention and things like that, I much prefer, let's say the double pivot of Xhaka and Partey over Xhaka and let's say Sambi Lokonga, if that's what we're going to see today. Am I getting rid of James? Absolutely not. I think because I think the reason why I've kept James in my team is because I've one free transfer. We're about to start some midweek games, and I think some injuries will crop up, or some situation that I haven't been able. I mean, we haven't seen yet will arise, similar to the James issue now. And because James has an illness as opposed to an injury, as reported by some Chelsea journalists, I actually think James will play versus West Ham, and because it seems like more of a precautionary situation with him, as opposed to he's, let's say, returning from injury and slowly being eased in from Tuchel. I think he starts the West Ham game and he just gets that rest, and he's going to be fresh for what on paper should be a great fixture, because West Ham clearly is not, in my opinion, a tough team as per the FDR right now. So far we've seen what West Ham, and they've been a pretty poor team. Z, you just love listening to my thoughts on players. I mean, I guess that's why I do the cheat sheet every week, right? Percentage on Perisic start. Sorry, mate, I'm not Paul O'Keefe. You're gonna have to slide into his DMs if you'd like. I can't give you any confirmation on Perisic starting. I probably think it's around 50%. James to Estupiñán or Walker or Diaz. I think if you don't have a Brighton defender already, I do like the move upside wise of Estupiñán. What I do think hurts is with Walker and Diaz, especially with maybe Akanji coming back in and maybe Walker or Diaz still getting rest with Ake coming back or Sergio Gomez playing one game. I just like the Estupiñán move a little bit more because Brighton have less chances to actually rotate players because they're not involved in Europe. Thoughts on James plus Archer to dunk to Solanke? See, that's a move that I really like, Michael. And that's exactly what we were talking about, was being able to get some funds back in. Solanke is actually still in a void on my cheat sheet, and that's because I just haven't seen anything so far from Solanke. But because he's coming back and he's going to be fit soon, I do think there's a lot of upside in gambling into Solanke. I'm just kind of worried about what kind of minutes we'll see, whether he'll be eased in 60, 70 minutes the first game round. I'd probably a little bit more, I'd be a bit more confident playing him the next game. But if you have someone who, if you like to just gamble the upside of Solanke, then that's fair enough. And maybe if you believe in the new manager bounce as well, that could be quite significant. Yeah, I am aware James is missing the game for Southampton, so I'm actually just gonna. I mean, I'm starting James on the off chance that James, I don't know, miraculously makes a trip down to Southampton and plays the game, but I'm definitely just going to be relying on Andreas's points this week. Don't sell James. I mean, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. I think if you have two free transfers, there's a lot of upside in going out of James. If you have one free transfer, I probably wouldn't sell James. If you have 0 free transfers and you're thinking about taking a hit for James, I also probably wouldn't do that. Maybe one free transfer. That's where I would be at odds with either going for Diaz. I mean, I myself thought about Diaz quite severely earlier today, but I just like the upside of James on West Ham. If he's not well enough to travel, doubt he'd be starting the weekend. I mean, there's still quite a bit of time for him to actually reach the weekend. I think a couple of days rest is enough, I would say, for a footballer to recover from a potential illness. I'm not obviously going to be 100% certain, but I'd prefer someone being ill and them starting over the weekend than coming back from, let's say, succumbing a knee injury or a heel injury or something like that. Henry, Fran, about my team, would you rather transfer in Cucurella or Estupiñán? I mean, you don't have another Chelsea defender, do you, Henry? So I actually prefer probably Cucurella for now. Martinelli to Gross. I mean, absolutely not, Ahmed. What are you doing there? I would definitely go Gross alongside Martinelli, but I definitely wouldn't go the pair of them. Mount to Gundogan and Walker to Brighton defender. I like those moves. Not so sure about dropping Walker this week because I do think it's almost a clean sheet on paper for City, but I can understand the upside of moving actually into Gundogan and finally releasing Mount from your team, which I imagine must have been an eternal burden. So absolutely go for that move. Thoughts on Dalot moving forward? Yeah, I mean, Dalot looked incredible. I mean, he actually basically plays as a right winger in that system, which tells you that he's going to get a lot of FPL hauls, I would say. But I think the double-edged sword of United is they still looked really poor for Southampton. There were many instances, especially in the second half, where Southampton could have scored. By the way, there's 85 of you guys in the live stream. I really appreciate the support. If you guys could like and even subscribe to the channel, that would be highly appreciated. How's it going, Taz? I'm doing well. Not so well after the Reece James illness news, but as well as I can be, really. I'm quite happy with the state of the team. I'm going to roll the transfer on paper. So Andreas is going to come in, and yeah, I mean, that's going to be the team. I'll have 2 free transfers, and I'll think about some transfers going forward. I like Rodrigo for the next few fixtures. I think by game week 8, if I'm wildcarding on game week 9, I could definitely dead end my team. I could do something like Luis Diaz into another midfielder, go into someone like Mitrovic. Hopefully, if he hasn't priced rised to an absurd amount, and then maybe, I mean, even someone like Gross for 1 fixture's not too crazy as well. Couple things on my mind, really. So that's just some of the things that I have on my mind, especially just to kind of avoid that Liverpool-Chelsea game as much as possible. Even going out of James potentially for that game will be quite interesting. Potentially moving out of James into a cheaper defender if the situation arises and I have enough transfers, and that allows me to go into Mitrovic. That's another consideration too. I'll keep my team as it is, so I'll just show you guys my team layout as I continue to answer some of the questions on chat. Rashford to Gross, a good pick. I would say so. Yeah, I think especially with Martial's having a Achilles injury, which is actually more of a medium-term injury. I don't really like the shape of what Rashford looks like and presents for this United team. For me, he's still a wait and see. He's obviously well priced, but I still don't think that this United team have really found the ideal attacking formation. I think Fernandes is actually the most interesting transfer. I mean, even on game week 8, you could maybe gamble on Fernandes as well. If you're thinking about shipping off some of the Liverpool players just for that 1 fixture, that game versus Leeds is going to be beautiful. To maybe take someone like Luis Diaz or even Salah out of your team, as crazy as it sounds, to go for that 1 week punt versus Leeds at home, and then you can dead end your team and go for a game week 9 play there with the wild card straight after that. So those are kind of things that are on my mind, but United don't seem too interesting for now, with exception to Fernandes. Cancelo captain. I think that's a safe choice because I think the clean sheet is quite close to nailed. Would I prefer it over Salah and Haaland? Potentially not. Yeah, Z. I mean, I think the deadline stream is nice because I get to spend a little bit more time on a specific topic. Ultimately, I don't have enough time in the cheat sheet to talk about, the 100 assets that we have in FPL, and sometimes I'm only trying to build on different kind of developments that have happened game week to game weeks. And so if, let's say, you missed out on a cheat sheet 1 week and you didn't hear my thoughts on Martinelli in game week 1, you might not understand why I still rate Martinelli as a game week 4 5 top option. But those kind of things are quite important. You could always rewatch the deadline stream if you'd like to listen to a podcast. Why are you sticking with James tonight if he hasn't traveled with the squad? I'm just hoping he plays versus West Ham. He's going to start with my team. I'd rather have 2 free transfers next week than have 1 free transfer next week. And I'd much rather have James than someone like a Ruben Diaz or even a Cucurella versus West Ham. I also really like how Andreas can come off the bench for me in place of James and still probably deliver what should be a decent game on paper, because I think Fulham have been very threatening, even playing some very, very tough teams so far. So, I mean, even in let's say, the Liverpool and the Arsenal games, which were their toughest games on paper, I would say Andreas still looked relatively interesting. And I do think Brighton's just a notch below those 2 teams. So the opportunity for Andreas to actually deliver this week is quite high. It doesn't look good on paper because I do have Dunk. But as I said, I do find it a little bit boring to move into a City defender. And even the side grade of Cucurella, that doesn't feel like it's worth losing 1 transfer when I could make much more powerful moves with 2 free transfers in the next week. Gross in for a -4. Just start Mbumo. I'd probably start Mbumo, my friend. Love your cheat sheets. Thank you so much, Robbie. -4 hit for James to Saliba. I probably wouldn't do that move, especially with Man United just the next game after that. It's probably not a move that I would advise. Especially since, I mean, if you think about it in a 2 game week window, if James gets to play versus West Ham and you're going for Saliba and he probably plays versus United and actually loses clean sheet at Old Trafford, I can't see what the upside of the hit was. You have to look at, I mean, every time you take a hit, and you get a player, and you kind of have to project a little bit into the future and see what happens with the team and what could happen. Captain Salah, Haaland, Jesus. I like Haaland, Salah, and Jesus in that order, and I think Haaland and Salah are a lot closer than Jesus is. So I think Jesus isn't even really an option in my mind. Hey, Fran, what do you think I should do with Veltman? He's 75%. I thought Veltman was actually quite close to full fitness. I think you should just play Veltman, to be honest. As far as I've heard, Veltman has actually recovered decently well from his injury, so I think he's good to go. Is it worth taking a hit to upgrade one of the bench options? Not right now, I would say, with 0.6. I mean, if you already have Andreas, I would probably say don't upgrade your bench today. I'd save the 0.6 to make some more effective transfers. Cucurella or Perisic? I'd probably go with Cucurella because I don't have any news on Perisic starting, and I don't think we'll get any news within the next 40 minutes, so that's just how things stand. You already have Cucurella, so what should you do about James to Walker Diaz? I mean, I like Estupinian if you don't have a Brighton defender. I think that's my preferred option. James going to play. James is not going to play. Tony or Mitrovic, Gameweek 5 to 10. I think overall Mitrovic will outperform, but I think for the short term, you want to go Tony first and then move into Mitrovic. Who am I captaining? It's going to be... Oh, that's a good point, actually. I'll just show my my captain here. It's going to be Haaland. Robertson to Cucurella. Honestly, I kind of prefer the situation that Robertson has playing versus Newcastle. Just because with James being out, with Fofana still not being in the team, probably actually enjoy Robertson a bit more. Cancelo potential price drop. Good for owners. I mean, yeah, it's good for owners in the sense that we get to enjoy, hopefully, a Cancelo haul. Fran, people talk about James. What about him? He's actually ill, Mosen, so he's gonna miss the game versus Southampton. Thank you, Hyper. Is it true that James is not playing? Yep. I'll actually pin that. I'm just gonna pin that at the top so people don't ask the same question, because that's basically what's going on with James this week. Double City defense out this week. I wouldn't go double City. I wouldn't go out of double City defense this week. I think this is the perfect week to actually have double City defense, if anything, unless your transfers were to move into a City midfielder, which I can kind of understand the gamble for. I wouldn't go out of triple City this week. This would be the week I definitely keep triple City. Walker or Diaz? I'd probably prefer Walker. Walker for Cancelo or trade James to upgrade midfield. I think I like the upside of trading James to upgrade midfield. I think any game where City are very likely to keep a clean sheet, I actually think that it's a very good game for Cancelo to get great bonus points on paper. So I much prefer moving out of Cancelo on a tougher fixture, if anything. Perisic to Dunk / Saliba. I'd prefer Dunk because Saliba has United ramping up so soon. What about Che Adams? Chelsea missed quite a few players, and after them the fixtures are great. Che Adams is an option. I mean, Solanke is an option too. I'm just feeling that Southampton and Bournemouth are still not good enough as teams. I think Che Adams isn't the most clinical player as well. Even amongst the sea of tough fixtures, I think Mitrovic is very clearly one of the better options. Make a captaincy poll. I don't think there's a point. I think it's going to be Salah or Haaland. It's going to be 50-50 down the line, I think. Why am I starting James if you won't start? Well, I'm praying for a miracle. I'm praying for James to actually start miraculously, which isn't going to happen. And then after that, basically, Andreas is going to come off my bench and replace him for James. So, yeah. In effect, there's no difference. But praying for a small, 2-3% chance that James suddenly arrives to play for Southampton tonight. And we'll see what happens there. James to Semedo, maybe? I don't really like the Wolves defense. I don't really like what Semedo is providing on paper. If I had to go for a Wolves defender, I might actually prefer Johnny a little bit more. And frankly, if I had to go for a Wolves player, I think the first person I would actually look at would be Jose Sa. Or Gonçalo Guedes, actually. Would you do Ward to Sanchez for a hit? Not this week. I think Fulham's a very tough game, especially since Fulham are playing at home. Best midfielder 6.4 under. I have to actually still back Martinelli. Or maybe I would actually say Rodrigo first, then Martinelli, then Gross. I think in that order. Very, very close between all three of them. I think Martinelli might... Maybe I would say Martinelli first, then Rodrigo, then Gross. I wouldn't go for Gross for a hit. I do think this is a slightly tougher fixture on paper for Brighton. Who to keep, Zinchenko or James? I would keep Zinchenko if you want... Because Zinchenko's more likely to play than James this week. Actually, then again, Zinchenko does play versus United. I'd probably go out of... It depends... It depends really on how your team is set up to accommodate for James coming back next week. Because if, let's say, you go from Zinchenko to Walker and you have excess funds to play around with, or you you need something more than 0.2 in the bank, then that's the difference between Zinchenko or James that you have to think about, right? So Walker to James, you're saving a lot more money. Zinchenko to Walker, you're saving a lot less money. So I would say think about your future moves, how that would affect you. Because for me, Zinchenko's game week 6 fixture is a lot worse than James. I much prefer James versus West Ham. Why not captain Salah? I think Haaland will start, and simply I think Haaland has the easier fixture on paper. Even if he plays 60 minutes, I think it's a better game for Haaland. I think it's very close though. I was flip-flopping on the Salah captaincy all day, all night, effectively. So I don't think it's a stupid decision to go either or. In fact, I think it's safer to go with the Salah captaincy. You've got 90 minutes of Salah, whereas with Haaland, you're gambling either he starts and plays 65, 70 minutes, or he simply comes off the bench for 20 to 30 minutes. And it might even be something like 15 if City are rolling the game. Hey Fran, been following since the Euros, love the content. Really appreciate that, Robbie, and really cool to see that you've been following since the Euros. Saka for Diaz to avoid being priced out next week, or hold on for the differential and hope Saka starts hauling. Frankly, I actually think Saka is one to hold this week. I think he's probably one. I think he's due for. Then again, Aston Villa have actually started to play quite defensively. Maybe for the longevity of your team, I think Diaz makes sense. Unfortunately, especially if you're going to be priced out. I think your hand is somewhat forced there, and it's not too bad because Luis Diaz has great games on paper. So I think it does make sense to move to Luis Diaz. Is Trippier injured? He's not injured, actually. I think Eddie Howe actually confirmed that Trippier is fit to play. Would you prefer Salah and Diaz or Rodrigo and KDB? I'd much prefer Salah and Diaz. Start Andreas or Patterson. Andreas by far. Jensen to Gross. I would definitely go for Jensen to Gross. That's a great transfer. James to Perisic or Cucurella. I'd go for Cucurella because I don't know whether Perisic starts. You might get Williams and Rodrigo in. Forest play Bournemouth at home next. Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I do like what Williams can provide on paper for the next week. And if James, let's say, misses out again for whatever reason, I do quite like actually playing Nico ahead of him. But of course, I will have 2 free transfers, so I'm sure I'll make a move around Reece James. No, Gordon Trippier's not injured. You think Salah's EO is below 100%, so not captaining him won't really hurt if he holds. Yeah, but I think it's the same situation where it's like, Salah's going to play 90 minutes, so I'm always going to be kicking myself if Salah gets a good haul, if it helps like that. Will you be doing any Champions League fantasy videos? Unfortunately, not this year, Will. I think, especially with work and how much time I'm actually spending on FPL videos, I don't feel like I have enough time to actually dedicate myself fully to UCL fantasy, and I don't really want to provide content that's a little bit half-assed, if I'm being honest. And last season, especially when I was working so many late nights, I realized I just couldn't match the demand of the Champions League content because I actually wasn't watching the Champions League games myself, and that's why I kind of backed out of going for UCL fantasy content, because I didn't think I could deliver at the same level with FPL. Mount to Foden for a -4. I wouldn't do it for a -4. Then again, honestly, Mount's been so terrible. I think it is worth a -4. Yeah, go for it. Have James, Perisic, and Haaland, and only one decent sub, with a good chance that 2 of those miss this game week, is something like James to Cucurella with my free transfer smart plan. Rangus, I think that's absolutely the case. Yeah, go for it. By the way, 100 of you guys who've reached 3 digits, thank you guys so much. If you guys could like the video and also subscribe, that'd be highly appreciated. Your team right now is Raya, James, Cucurella, Cancelo, Trent, Salah, Rodrigo, Grove, Martinelli, Gross, Haaland. 2.3 mil and 1 transfer left. What do you think? Think of doing James to Dunk and Pereira. Yeah, I actually really like the James to Dunk, Pereira to Diaz -4. Worth a -4 for De Silva to Rodrigo. Yeah, I actually really like that transfer, especially since you're priced out of Gundogan. You could obviously think about Bernardo Silva too, Ibrahim. It depends on whether you have Triple City. What about Bernardo at this price? Yeah, I completely agree. Sell Trippier or Reece James are both even. I'd probably sell Reece James first because I think Trippier will play, and Trippier is a great option going forwards. As far as Reece James, if you have 2 free transfers, you can simply go back into Reece James the next week anyways, right? You're still on the dilemma for the armband. Are you sure Haaland will not be? I'm not sure about anything. It's just, I have a gut feeling that Haaland will start because of the logic of how the fixtures work, with Sevilla being the game after Aston Villa. I think it makes more sense to rest Haaland against Aston Villa as opposed to playing him as a starter versus Aston Villa and then having him play in quite an important group game. I think Sevilla is one of the toughest games in that group for them, even though Sevilla have shown some pretty terrible form in La Liga lately. So that's how things are. What is my work? So I'm an auditor, so at a big four firm, so the hours aren't always the best. Bailey plus Zinchenko to Bernardo plus Saliba for -4. They're your starters. Yeah, it's a good question. What I don't like about the -4, I think, as I argued with someone else previously, is that by going into Saliba, it does feel like you are taking a -4, and then immediately you're kind of hit with a brick wall, which is going to be that United fixture, where I think Saliba will actually lose his clean sheet. So even though I independently like Bernardo as an option, I probably would prefer a Brighton defender in that situation, because I feel like at the very least, the short term, and maybe if you're wildcarding in Game Week 9, I think I prefer a Brighton defender. Sean, glad to join your live stream just before the deadline. Will you start Andreas over Neto? No, I'd start Neto over Andreas, especially getting to play Bournemouth. Let's get Fran to 11k subs. I think we're actually pretty close, guys. So if we could get 11k subs, that'd be quite cool. I'll actually have to see if we're actually close to 11k subs. I think we are very close, so that would be really, really lovely if you guys could do that. Thank you guys so much. If you were to take out James, who would you replace him with? Probably a City defender first, and then maybe a Brighton defender second. Or a lateral move to Cucurella as well is another option. Actually, I'd probably rate it so that I would say Diaz, Stones, Walker, and then Cucurella, and then maybe a Brighton defender. Is captaining Jesus a punt? It's a mega punt, Connor. I think most people are captaining Salah or Haaland this week, so it will be a great punt. Is it a great punt? I think when both Salah and Haaland are faced with such a great game on paper, and Aston Villa seem to be playing quite defensive football, I'd probably actually back one of Haaland or Salah, because I think Haaland has the volatility, but with his crazy numbers and we know his ability to perform in very few minutes, I think he's got the upside there. Whereas Salah, we just have that permanence over multiple years of such a proven asset doing well, and Liverpool finding their footing basically with the Bournemouth game and also playing at home. You reckon Bernardo will start? It's between him and Rodrigo. I'm undecided now. I can't confirm that. I do think Bernardo does start, but I'd probably prefer Rodrigo in this fixture. Who to transfer Bailey out for? I mean, how much money do you have in the bank, Suleiman? Mount to Luis Diaz or Gundogan. If I get Gundogan, I need to replace Walker, Cancelo though. I mean, I think if you, I think if you get the chance to replace Walker, I quite like the Luis Diaz move. You've gone James to Estupinian for a short-term game. Wish me luck. Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with that, Harry. Is Kane to Haaland a crazy idea? I think a little bit, yes, because Haaland's inevitably going to be rotated at least one of the games in Game Week 5 and 6. That's almost been confirmed by Pep. And I think Kane is such a good captaincy option in Game Week 6. I wouldn't do that if I was a Kane owner. The same way as a Haaland owner, I wouldn't move into Kane. You've gone Saka to Diaz as well. Yeah, I think it's very logical. I talked about Goncalo Guedes earlier, and he was actually someone who's on my cheat sheet already. So yeah, he's definitely an interesting player to go for. Of course, be careful that kind of Bournemouth new manager bounce as well. Dunk or Veltman. I'm a little bit more in the Dunk camp myself. I'd rather Estupinian, to be honest, if you're looking at 4.5 player. Estupinian and Rodrigo or Cucurella? I think I mean, is it 2 free transfers or a hit? What's the situation there, Alex? You reckon Bernardo will start? As I said, I can't confirm that. James and Pereira out for Harrison and Johnny. Oof, I probably wouldn't try to take Pereira out, but I can understand maybe you looking for 2 starters. Harrison and Johnny aren't bad moves, especially if you're going to dead end your team. You've got 2 free transfers to burn. Shall you replace the injured Archer? I mean, I guess you could go Archer to Stansfield if you must, but just make sure that you don't block yourself and win triple Fulham. Barnes versus Eze. I'd probably go for Barnes, actually. Even though Eze is someone I prefer on paper from the eye test, from a footballing point of view, I think from an FPL point of view, I prefer Barnes. But I think they're way too out there as differentials. I think Eze is a little bit more interesting because he costs a little less. But Barnes does actually cost quite a significant amount, and I don't really like Barnes. Much prefer rather going to someone like Zaha, as long as I knew if he played. I don't think... I mean, Zaha seems like a 50-50. Patrick Vieira hasn't really provided any updates for us, so that's kind of the situation as things stand. I have James, Zinchenko, and Bailey with 2 free transfers and 0.1 in the bank. What should I do, Fran? Yeah, that's a tough situation, actually. You've got 3 players who you kind of need to replace. I'd probably think about going for a Brighton defender. first and foremost. I'd probably go for a City defender as well, just because the fixtures are better when we kind of look at Old Trafford for Arsenal, and then also James just simply missing out a game. And those are the moves I'd probably make. If you need to actually replace Bailey, I mean, I'd probably just... I'm hoping you have Andreas in your team. You can just play him instead of Bailey. Do you reckon you need at least Gross or Rodrigo? I don't think so, because I think some defenders in the game actually cover both Gross or Rodrigo quite well. In fact, I think, to be frank, like some players are playing 5-3-2 templates with no players from Brighton and no players from... Well, actually, with exception to Robert Sanchez, but no kind of attacking Brighton or Leeds players, and those template teams are doing fine. So what I'm kind of suggesting is, let's say I move Nico Williams into like Walker for argument's sake, and I drop, you know, Rodrigo into Reed. I mean, you could even push yourself into Ruben Diaz for this week, right? This is kind of like a template team. Arguably, you'd have Cucurella as well over James for this week. Maybe even someone like Perisic in this position. This kind of team, and once again, you could... This is the template team so far, is something that looks like this. Either Gabriel or Saliba. I'll just go with Saliba just to save money. But a lot of people are basically playing a 5-3-2 formation. This is like the most template team possible. Maybe you have Diaz replaced with Perisic, but there's still money in the bank to play around with. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, that could go towards upgrading a forward in the future as well. So this is an interesting team that I think a lot of people are currently running. And obviously, it even has the space to go into Gross that we've been talking about. So this is quite a template team. It's like 12 players that you would actually be happy to rotate. Let's say when Saliba plays United, you'd be happy to play everyone else, right? When Perisic plays for City, you'd probably be happy to play Saliba by contrast. So this is quite an interesting template team that a lot of people are looking at if you're interested at 5 at the back. But for now, I mean, I'm taking a little bit more of a gamble, I guess, by just going for Rodrigo. But I don't think he's essential. Absolutely not. It just changed, refreshed. James got injured. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what FPL does, right? James is actually someone that we know he's ill. I mean, let's have a look at Twitter just to see if there's any kind of updated news on James. Because FPL doesn't really have the most up-to-date news coming from the actual injury website itself. It's actually better to have a look at inside the know kind of journalists. Just gonna quickly scroll through the Twitter timeline just to see what's going on. I mean, people are still saying he's ill. It doesn't seem like there's anyone who's actually confirmed that it's a genuine knock. I think it's because he actually had a little bit of treatment on the pitch last week, and that's why people think it might be a knock. But yeah, so like Nathan Gissing said, it was just illness. So I think that's really the only update we've had on James from a legitimate source. Rodrigo is captain. I think that's way too much of a differential. I'd probably skip that. I'd probably still back Salah or Haaland. Any early thoughts on Jesus to Mitrovic in Game Week 8? I like the move, Michael, frankly. I do think Haaland will start. I mean, that's definitely why I'm captaining him. So what the hell do I do when Zinchenko is injured and James is ill? I think you need to find a replacement for Zinchenko. Probably a Brighton defender. Cancelo captain? Yeah, I think that's quite a safe captaincy. Probably the 3rd or 4th most interesting captain on my mind. Maybe 5th even, if you include KDB in the discussion, since he gets to play versus Nottingham Forest. Sulaiman, I think you do want to go for a Brighton defender first and foremost. And then maybe also think... I mean, you could also go into an alternative Arsenal defender too. And hopefully the money in the bank, Sulaiman, will probably allow you to upgrade to another playing player next week. Dunk or Andreas? I'd probably play Dunk. James to Estupinian and Aronson to Rodrigo. I like those moves, Jack. Nice 76ers logo as well. KDB or Salah for captain? Definitely Salah, I think, over KDB. But I do think Haaland has the upside there. Who to captain? Look, it's I think it's a genuine 50-50 between Hala and Salah. Sorry, I mean Salah and Haaland. I've been talking about these two players so much that I've got my tongue tied. It's crazy. Yeah. You know what? Let's actually do a captaincy poll for the sake of it, because everyone's asking the question. Your mom is Joel's nutritionist. That's awesome. Are you living in the States as well? Or are you living separately? Fran, do you play any La Liga fantasy leagues? I actually don't, Henry. But maybe next year you should actually invite me to a league and we can actually play together. I pretty much exclusively watch the Real Madrid games. So a lot of the early votes going for Haaland so far. Probably actually exactly what we expected. Gabriel instead of James. I do like Gabriel instead of James. But you need to think about a plan for when Gabriel plays for United. Okay, change your captain and make another captaincy poll. Well, you think my captaincy right here is influencing the poll, Ahmed. I do think most of the players are going to captain Haaland. I mean, he's just a demon. Yeah, I don't know. Like, just watching him versus Crystal Palace, and even if he gets 60 minutes versus Nottingham Forest, that's all I'm asking for, really, to have a crazy captaincy haul. And this Newcastle team, yes, okay, you've got Bruno Guimaraes, who's out, that's significant. Maybe St. Maximin is also out, that's significant. But when it comes down to the defense, it has markedly improved. Pope is a huge upgrade. Trippier, I think offensively, just in terms of how they keep the ball, how they retain, how they play on the right, that's a huge upgrade too. So yeah, there's a few key pieces missing, but I do feel like Newcastle isn't a joke. There was a supposed ITK who said Man City trained a tactic without Haaland yesterday. Do you mind sending me this ITK, because that's news to me. Moving to States next year on scholarship. That's awesome, Jack. Congratulations as well on your scholarship. Is Operation Target Bournemouth viable? Well, I think it's definitely target the weaker teams if you own a player from Arsenal, City, and Chelsea or Liverpool. But I don't necessarily think targeting Bournemouth with the more mid-table, even bottom half teams makes that much sense. Abhishek, thank you so much for the donation. So Ramsdale, Ward, Robertson, James, Cancelo, Trippier, Trent, Bailey, Pereira, Salah, Martinelli, Gross, Archer, Jesus, Haaland, transfer. And he also starting 11. I mean, do you have one transfer, Abhishek, or do you have two free transfers? I'd probably make a move away from James, and I'd probably go into Diaz. That's probably the transfer I would make, because you don't have a Man City midfielder. That's the one transfer I'd think about, because Trippier, you could probably play him next week with no concerns, and at least he's playing today. You've got Pereira to cover Trippier if you'd like to do that, and then a replacement from James to Diaz is quite helpful. So I think that's probably the move to make, Abhishek. The Salah captaincy is actually swung towards Salah. Okay, that's kind of making me panic now, guys. Mateus Nunes, I don't really think I don't really see him as someone who's an option in FPL. I much prefer Guedes. Best midfielders under 6.4 excluding Martinelli. I think Rodrigo and Gross are neck and neck, basically, and probably the best options. Captain on Jesus or Salah? I mean, definitely Salah over Jesus for me. Zinchenko to Estupinian for -4, so I can drop James to the bench. Yeah, I think, Johnny, that's a good idea. Jensen, Brentford, or Andreas as first bench option. I think that's also good general logic too. Unless, for example, if one of your priority moves to move away from James is to Diaz, then I can understand moving away from James if you have Zinchenko and James. But if it's not Diaz, you could obviously just move away from Zinchenko, because the Old Trafford fixture is not something that you really desire Zinchenko returning to anyways. Rodrigo captain, I'd probably skip out on that. Cancelo C over Haaland, it's probably not as interesting. A little bit of a sketchy source, yeah. Yeah. Oh, man, do I have to stick the armband on Salah on very rogue, suspicious news? I don't think I'm going to do that. Best Brighton defender. I think Estupinian on paper, but then I think Dunk if you're risk averse and you're scared about minutes. Cucurella out. What do you mean by Cucurella out? Sorry. Why would you go Cucurella out? So what was your answer regarding Jensen versus Andreas? Andreas for sure. James out for Cucurella and Bailey to Gross. Yep, I like those moves. Death by DNA. Cucurella or Gabriel for 1 week. Cucurella for me. Your thoughts on Jesus captain? Definitely worse than Salah and Haaland are my thoughts. All right, I'm going to quickly try to go through a little bit of Twitter. Cucurella Estupinian. I think we already kind of discussed this, Henry. So but do let me know if you've changed your moves. This is Rory's team here. Honestly, probably good to go. I Hey Fran, quick question. In case James doesn't play, do I start Andreas or Dunk? I'd probably start Dunk over Andreas. If I had to choose between the two of them. For some reason, am actually playing both. Would you take a hit for Sanchez in for Ward? Who are Leicester playing? United, right? Yeah, I probably would actually take that hit. Because eventually you just have to unfortunately stomach the pain and just go for it. Any suggestions for this team? You can play that back 4, no issues. Could even play the back 5, arguably. You got a midfield 3, 5-3-2. I think I wouldn't actually touch this team since James is out. I'd be quite happily playing Andreas this week. And I think that's how things stand. Who do let Zinchenko or James? I will go to Walker. I think you go out at Zinchenko. Thoughts on Mount to Gundogan and then selling Walker. I think that makes sense, moving out from Mount to Gundogan. Any input to improve the squad? 2 free transfers. Think of dropping Salah / Trent to Diaz and Sterling. Huge differential. Huge risk, but I like it. I do actually like those moves on paper. I really do think that going Salahless is a completely viable strategy. Due to the James news, what's your thoughts on selling my Zinchenko? I was holding for Estupinian. Yeah, I think you play Estupinian and you take that -4. Robbo and Archer to Emerson, West Ham United, and Tony. Ooh. I still prefer Nico Williams. But then... Wait, I'm sorry, what? Oh. No, I think you're going way too deep out of the defense here. I wouldn't like those moves. Harold, maybe James to Dunk, James to Cucurella. I'd still keep in many situations, so I still think my order of priority is actually as third City defender, then Cucurella, then a Brighton defender if you're looking for transfers out this week. Zinchenko is 100% out. I'm not actually sure about that. We just haven't really got enough confirmation. I think a lot of people are therefore moving Zinchenko out. Cucurella for Gabriel for 1 week. Or Gabriel. I'd probably back Cucurella. Thoughts on KDB captaincy? It's differential, but it's not terrible. I still prefer Salah. How sure are you that Haaland will start? Let's just say 51%, because that's pretty much my sentiments on a Haaland captaincy over Salah. I'm going to go to visit my old friend FB Ref and have a look at the expected goals allowed stat. And just think about what Haaland's going to do versus Nottingham Forest team. Yeah. Am I mad to captain Gundogan? I actually don't think so. I think it's a decent differential. So good luck on that. Like ultimately, if you're captaining a City player this week, I don't think it's bad at all. It's a great game on picture for City, and for all intents and purposes, City could absolutely demolish Nottingham Forest in a similar manner to the way Liverpool demolished Bournemouth. Gross or Harrison? I'd probably go for Gross. Who should I captain? I'm going with Haaland, but I think Salah's just as justified. I mean, if you look at the captaincy poll, it's practically neck and neck. Haaland was actually the winner by 54%. Get out of double Chelsea defense, as in James out. Yeah, I actually quite like going James out if you have double Chelsea defense. So yeah. 2 free transfers and no money in the bank. Not sure if I want to play Trippier and Andrea. And oh, okay, I see what you mean. I'd probably play Andreas, and I'd probably go for a City defender. What would you do with this team? Look, personally, Harold, I would actually go for Cucurella, in my opinion. Or Diaz, actually. By the way, thanks, Johnny. Let's go back to CM Punk's. Would you hold Reese for switch? Can't seem to figure out a viable alternative. Have zero bench at the moment, which is kind of worrying. Oof, yeah, that's a tough situation. But you actually do have a good playing team. How many free transfers? Stones fixed. If you're in a situation in your team where you've got 2 free transfers, it does actually make sense to go into a City defender this week because you're kind of gambling on the clean sheet probability, which is tremendously high versus Nottingham Forest. And from that point of view, I think it does make a lot of sense to go into someone like a Diaz or a Stones if you have 2 free transfers. Now, if you have 1 free transfer or you have 0 free transfers, I think it's a completely different situation. You'd probably rather actually hold on to James. If you're a little bit more of an aggressive manager and you like trying to capture upside, then I can understand instead of playing Andreas that you'd like to go for a City defender. I hope that kind of makes sense. Do we have any plans to pick Spurs players in coming weeks? Yeah, basically, I will be looking for a Perisic angle and potentially maybe still pivoting away from Haaland depending on how the rotation works for him. Someone's panic transfer James to Diaz. I still think it's a great move, Rob. No issues there. And exactly as I was arguing, 2 free transfers is the perfect situation to go away from James into a City defender. What's your pick for captain, Fran? It's Haaland, but we've got 8 minutes to change my mind. Yeah, absolutely, Django. We'll be checking Discord. Good luck to you, Samarth. Thank you, Harold. Once your thoughts on making TA or Walker as conservative captain choice. Really don't like. I think Salah's the best captaincy choice that's conservative because Haaland has really high highs and potentially really low lows if we're getting 10 to 15 minutes of Haaland. So I think Salah is actually the safest one. And this is simply because I do think Newcastle have the ability to break the Liverpool clean sheet, which I wouldn't have said the same about Bournemouth, frankly. I'm not going away from Reece this week. I might go away from him if I hear more news about him later on. I'm just going to have a look at Janga's team from Discord, if you guys don't mind me. So I think, yeah, you definitely play Andreas. Unfortunately, De Silva is not the best situation. How much do you have in the bank? You used up 2 free transfers, Vishnu. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, look, ultimately, you're playing Andreas. I really think I'd play Andreas over De Silva and then just play Trippier and just hope that Trippier scores a screamer or gets an assist. Because I'm not really seeing anything from De Silva where I would say he's even worth the upside. And Crystal Palace away is a very tough fixture for me. And at the very least, you get James back next week. So that's probably what I would do. Robbo and Neto out for Duncan Rodrigo. Good moves on paper, frankly. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably just play Andreas. I know it doesn't look good because you actually have Dunk on your team. But yeah, I'm not really seeing much from De Silva. Whereas Andreas, I feel like, okay, maybe Dunk loses a clean sheet, but at least you have Andreas to cover that, hopefully, because he's probably someone who could cause damage to this Brighton team. Whereas with De Silva, I'm not really sure if he does either or. Stones or Diaz, I'd probably say Stones to save some money for yourself. Luis Diaz, a better option. Not for me. Do you think Walker will get Pep Roulette? Potentially. I guess you can go Bright to defender for James, and then you could always just move Walker back up into James in the future. Rishabh, 1 free transfer, 0.7 in the bank. Thoughts? So very strong Spurs team so far. Fair enough. And not really in a bad situation at all. So no James. Interesting. I actually think you should roll here. I think that's a perfect roll opportunity. Thibaut can take our James for Duncan Pereira for Diaz -4. Yeah, I actually like those moves. That's a hit that I actually do quite like. I'm going to go back onto YouTube for a sec while I kind of stare at the captaincy for the next few minutes of my life and think about it. Notorious, thank you so much for the donation. Should I transfer James now into who? Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at your team from last week, Notorious, because I'm pretty sure I actually had it with me. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, because you already have Triple City, and unfortunately, you already have Cucurella. I think the best transfer is going to... I think Estupinian has the upside there. I think you just do Estupinian. James or Neto? I mean, James isn't going to play, so I'd play Neto. Start Perisic or Patterson. Perisic looks like he'll be rotated. I'd still start Perisic. I can't see what the upside is with Patterson. At least with Perisic, you've already seen that he can assist off the bench. With Patterson, I mean, he could play 60 minutes and still lose that clean sheet. So, yeah. Would you start Trippier or Andreas? I'd probably start Andreas. James to Estupinian and Aronson to Rodrigo, or James to 4.0 def and Rodrigo and Gross in 2 free transfers. Ooh, I kind of like the Rodrigo and Gross option. It does chase quite a bit of upside, and I do like that. Is Trent a stupid captain? Not necessarily, but I don't think he's the best. You're leaving Gross on the bench again. Good luck, Rob. James is playing. James is not playing. Should you move off Ruben Diaz? Not this week, my friend. All right, good luck, Jordy. I have Trent captain before. It has been painful, but I wish the best of luck to you. I don't know if I should actually pivot the Salah captain. Tragic stuff. Yeah, I'll send a prayer for you. And do let me know what haul Trent gets, because it will be. It's good to always see Trent captaincy pay off, especially when Salah's staring at you right down the barrel. I'm gonna have to refresh for the next 3 minutes and just think about my captaincy, guys. I don't think I'll be answering any questions too seriously. So Salah 90 minutes, 92 even versus Newcastle. And then Haaland. Does he start versus Nottingham Forest? Pep gave us no answers. He was 50-50. Once again, some talk about Julian Alvarez that doesn't really matter. And then he says we can wait and see for good old Haaland. Go with my gut. Trent captain. I think it's a bit of a dangerous sign. I still prefer Salah over Trent this week. It will be much worse for your rank if you captain Salah and Haaland outscores him. True. It'll also be a lot better for my rank if Salah outscores Haaland, because I think Haaland's effective ownership will be higher. Salah's more sensible. Can you believe that we're actually saying that Salah's a sensible pick? The best FPL asset in the last 5 years is now a sensible pick because Haaland is such an alien. Salah or Haaland, the answer might be Jesus. Yeah, Rishabh, I think you're on the money there. That was a thought I had at night. All right, guys, let's just swap to Salah. All right. Oh my God. Hmm. Yeah, I'm going Salah. Yeah. All right. Locked in Salah captaincy. That was tough. All right, guys. Good luck. I hope you guys locked in the right picks and you're happy with them. Um, Look, I think under most models, even under my estimations, it was like 51-49, and I've gone Salah, so it is what it is. Um, Gonna take a good old screenshot of this team to see what it looks like before the impending doom that is either a Holland mega haul or Salah lifting my spirits a little bit. Whew. Tried to swap to Salah. Jeez. Yeah, man. That 559 moves are never really recommended. But yeah. I'm gonna have to pray to Pep Guardiola um for a Haaland benching this week. I've got buyer's remorse. Yeah, I mean I accidentally bought two Salahs instead of one, so I think it could be a mistake because I left the coupon of double Haaland off on the table. Why didn't you take off Reece James for Andreas? Well, simply because I think Andreas will just come on for Reece James anyways, because I don't think Reece James will play, and that's just how the benching system works. Your bench will just replace your starting player. So let's say because Reece James doesn't play at all, he plays 0 minutes. Your first bench option comes on, and if your first bench option doesn't play, then so on and so forth. It goes to your second and third picks. So in effect, there's no change. And if there's a miracle out there, if for some reason Reece James can take an emergency trip down to Southampton and get us some goals, then I have Reece James playing for me. Gordon Diaz for James, had Gano and Haaland. Good luck. Captain Salah. How many points I got? Yeah, I mean, so far my rank's 262k. Nothing crazy so far, just 274 points. Obviously, you know, had a Salah captaincy last week, so it could have been an explosive week, but wasn't to be. Gundo's a great option for this week. Absolutely agree with you. I think he's a great pick. You did the change on 59-59. I mean, look, it was tough enough to do on 59, so well done, Leo. Another Haaland mega haul, and I'm in the mud. Yeah, I think I'll be in the mud as well. But you know what? I made my decision, so I'm just gonna, lie in that bed. I'm kind of banking that Bruno Guimaraes is injured. That does make the Newcastle team worse. I didn't really like Newcastle versus Wolves. I thought Wolves actually cracked off a lot of interesting counter attacks, especially coming from the right. A lot of great crosses as well. Hoping that Salah gets a penalty, best case scenario, and that Haaland gets rested because Pep didn't convince me enough. Can't believe people last season were bored of captaining Salah and him hauling every week. Like, I'll take that any week. The thing is, Rishab, we have a player called Haaland, and frankly, he's got some insane numbers and potentially could break the Premier League goal scoring record on the trajectory that he's on. And he's actually backing that up by his expected goal numbers as well. What we have with Salah, of course, is someone who can score an extra goal, an extra point for each goal, and could get a clean sheet point, and could therefore even match Haaland quite easily, I suppose, when you factor in Haaland having diminished minutes, as long as Haaland or Salah returns to normal. What happened to holding hands? Yeah, my flatmate's actually gone for an absolutely crazy move of going Sterling and Bernardo, so I really respect that move, but I'm sat here just captaining Salah. And to be honest, the reason why I'm not holding hands is because these guys have been killing me with Kevin De Bruyne in Gameweek 2 and also some non-Salah captaincy picks, especially in Gameweek 4. So the only way I can come back in my local league amongst my friends is to captain Salah. And I think he's a great pick to actually do that with. So So it is what it is. Thank you guys so much for watching the content as well. Such an interesting game week. I hope you guys have a wonderful time. And I will catch you actually in the weekend with a lot more content to come. Your captain is Jesus, Omar. Good luck with that. I think it'll be a decent pick, but I do think Aston Villa are starting to park the bus. They do need to get results. They do need to, and they have been playing very defensively. You can see, for example, in the West Ham game that West Ham only amassed an XG of 0.4. So, and Aston Villa's defensive numbers actually aren't that poor, but we know offensively they're extremely dire. So, I feel like Aston Villa is one of the teams to target where you can probably expect something like a 1-0, 2-0, or even 2-1 game versus them, but nothing crazy. Who is your captain, Omar? yeah, we need to know. You're okay with moving James on. His position has been variable this season, and Saliba will be 5.5 by the new year. I mean, Geronimo said, I think that is slightly overpricing Saliba, because at the end of the day, he is the centre back, and you have someone like Gabriel who's also 5.0. So I don't really think that Saliba will go there. Leanne, good luck, Fran. Catch you on the flip side. You saved me on James, had 5 in defense. Good luck, Leanne. Yeah, I'm glad I was able to come in clutch there, and hope you're doing well this season. Would love to see how you're getting on later on. I've done James to Diaz. Yeah, very, very sensible move, Will. So well done there. Salah hat-trick. I bloody hope so. Isaac for next week. Not for me, Ben. I feel like I'm more the type of manager who's just looking at Mitrovic as my third forward, and not Isaac for now. Good luck to everyone. And yeah, I mean, Estupiñán was a great pick. I went for Dunk last week, which is why I have Dunk in my team. But I can completely understand people backing Estupiñán as an option. And I wonder, actually, in the end, did we actually get to 11k subs? Maybe not, but I hope that happened. Not yet, but let's see if we can actually get that next week round. All right, thank you guys so much, and take care.